The restaurant was the kind of place where rich people went to be seen. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Waiters moved quietly between tables, carrying plates that cost more than most people's weekly salary. Soft music played in the background. Everything about the place said money, power, and status. Amelia Reyes did not belong there, and she knew it. She sat alone at a small table near the back, wearing a simple blue dress she had saved 3 months to buy. Tonight was her birthday, 26 years old, and for once she wanted to do something nice for herself. She had booked a table, ordered a slice of chocolate cake, and told herself this small moment was hers to enjoy. She did not know that tonight would change her life forever. At the table beside her sat a group of 5 people, 3 women and 2 men, all dressed in expensive clothes, laughing loudly, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. Their leader was a woman named Vanessa Hale, daughter of a wealthy hotel owner. Vanessa had a sharp tongue and an even sharper need to feel superior to everyone around her. It did not take long before Vanessa noticed Amelia. "Oh my God," Vanessa said, not even bothering to lower her voice. "Look at her alone, eating cake. At her size, shouldn't she be having a salad?" The table burst into laughter. Amelia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Her cheeks turned red, but she said nothing. She had heard comments like this her whole life. She had learned painfully that silence often hurt less than fighting back. But Vanessa was not finished. Seriously. "Though," Vanessa continued, raising her voice even more, clearly wanting nearby tables to hear, "it's actually sad. She's sitting here alone, celebrating what exactly? Being big and lonely." Another woman at the table giggled. "Maybe it's a pity party." Amelia stared down at her plate. Her hands were shaking slightly. She thought about standing up and walking out, but her legs felt frozen. The waiter who had served her cake glanced over, uncomfortable, but said nothing. Nobody said anything, except one man, in the far corner of the restaurant, seated alone at a private table, shadowed by a large plant. A man in a simple black suit had been quietly watching the entire scene unfold. He had not touched his drink. His eyes had not left Amelia's table since Vanessa's first comment. He looked ordinary at first glance. Mid-30s, dark hair, calm face. The kind of man you might walk past on the street without a second thought. But if you looked closely, really closely, you would notice the way his eyes tracked every movement in the room. The way the restaurant staff avoided walking too close to his table. The way the restaurant's owner had personally greeted him at the door earlier, bowing slightly. Before disappearing into the kitchen, this man was Damien Cross. Very few people outside a small, dangerous circle knew his real name. To the police, he was a ghost, a shadow behind dozens of unsolved cases. To the underworld, he was the most feared man in the entire city. Businesses paid him for protection. Rivals who crossed him disappeared quietly, never to be heard from again. He controlled more money and power than most politicians in the country. Yet he moved through the world almost invisibly. Tonight, he had come to this restaurant for a quiet business meeting that had ended early. He had planned to finish his drink and leave. Instead, he found himself unable to look away from the girl in the blue dress, Vanessa. Encouraged by the laughter of her friends, stood up from her table and walked toward Amelia with a mocking smile. "Actually," she said loudly, "let me help you celebrate properly." She picked up a small dessert menu from Amelia's table and waved it like a fan. "Maybe skip the cake next time, sweetie. Just a thought." The whole restaurant seemed to hear it. A few people glanced over, then quickly looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to get involved. Amelia felt her eyes burn with tears she refused to let fall. She had promised herself, walking into this restaurant, that tonight would be different, that she would not let anyone ruin this small moment for her, but it was already ruined. She stood up quickly, pulling her purse close, ready to leave before the tears came. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. That was when Damien Cross moved. He rose from his table calmly, without any rush, and walked directly toward Vanessa's group. The restaurant went quiet almost instantly. Waiters froze mid-step. The manager, who had been watching from across the room, went pale. "Is there a problem here?" Damien asked. His voice was low, controlled, but it carried a weight that made the entire room feel colder. Vanessa turned, still smiling, not recognizing the danger standing in front of her. "No problem," she said carelessly. "Just having a little fun." Damien looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Amelia, who stood frozen, unsure of what was happening. "Fun," Damien repeated quietly, "at someone else's expense is not fun. It's cruelty." The restaurant manager appeared beside them almost instantly, whispering something urgently into Vanessa's ear. Her face changed the moment she heard it, the color draining from her cheeks. Whatever the manager had told her, it was enough to silence her completely. Her friends exchanged nervous glances, suddenly unsure of what was really happening. Damien did not raise his voice. He did not threaten anyone directly. But something about his presence made it clear this was not a man to be challenged. "I believe," Damien said, turning to Amelia, "you were about to enjoy your cake." Amelia stared at him, stunned. She had no idea who this man was, why the entire restaurant had gone silent around him, or why Vanessa's confident smile had completely disappeared. All she knew was that for the first time in her life, someone had stood up for her without hesitation, a complete stranger, in front of a room full of people. She did not know his name. She did not know what he did for a living. She had no idea that the quiet man now pulling out a chair to sit across from her was the most dangerous man in the entire city, and that tonight, without knowing it, she had just caught his attention in a way that would change both their lives forever. Vanessa Hale did not sleep that night. She lay in her expensive apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over in her mind. The restaurant manager's whispered words kept echoing in her head. "That's Damien Cross. Do not say another word. Please, for your own safety." She had heard the name before, whispered in certain circles her father moved in, business circles that dealt in things nobody talked about openly. Her father had once warned her, half joking, half serious, "There are men in this city you don't want to know exist. Damien Cross is one of them." She had laughed it off back then. Now, lying awake at 3 in the morning, she wasn't laughing. She had humiliated a stranger in front of him, and he had looked at her the way a man looks at something he intends to remember. Across the city, in a penthouse office on the 40th floor of a building he owned through 3 different shell companies, Damien Cross stood by the window, looking out over the city lights. He hadn't slept either, but not out of fear. His second-in-command, a quiet, careful man named Marcus, stood near the door, waiting. "You wanted information," Marcus said. "On the girl." Damien didn't turn around immediately. "Amelia Reyes," he said. "Find out everything." Marcus nodded once and left without another word. He had worked for Damien for 9 years. He knew better than to ask why. In 9 years, Damien had never once asked for information on a woman. That alone made this different. By the next afternoon, Marcus returned with a folder. Damien sat behind his desk, sleeves rolled up, reading glasses on, the same calm, controlled man from the restaurant, though now surrounded by the quiet machinery of an empire built on fear and precision. "Amelia Reyes," Marcus began, 26 years old, works as a junior accountant at a small firm downtown, lives alone in a rented apartment on the east side. No family in the city. Her mother passed away 4 years ago, father left when she was a child. No siblings. Damien listened without interrupting, his eyes scanning the photographs in the folder. A woman walking to work alone, a woman eating lunch alone, a woman sitting on a park bench alone. She was bullied in school, Marcus continued. Records show multiple incidents. She left college early, financial reasons according to the file, though there's also a note about social difficulties. Damien's jaw tightened slightly. He said nothing. She has good work reviews, Marcus added. Reliable, quiet, keeps to herself. No boyfriend, no close friends that we could identify. She has dinner alone most nights. Damien closed the folder slowly. There was something about the file that unsettled him. A man who had built his life controlling chaos, ordering violence and moving fortunes with a single phone call. He had seen wealth, betrayal, greed, and cruelty in every form imaginable. Nothing usually surprised him anymore but this quiet, ordinary loneliness, a woman who simply wanted to eat a slice of cake alone on her birthday, struck something in him he could not name. "Vanessa Hale," Damien said finally. "What do we have on her?" Marcus straightened. "Her father owns 3 luxury hotels in the city. He's been trying to get a permit approved for a 4th, a big development on the waterfront. It's been stuck in city council for 8 months. Damien's eyes sharpened slightly. "Stuck how?" "Rumor is he's been trying to bribe the wrong people. Officials who happen to already work for us." A slow, quiet understanding passed over Damien's face. Not anger, not yet, just calculation. The kind of look that made men far more dangerous than a raised voice ever could. "Interesting," Damien said softly. That evening, Amelia sat in her small apartment, still replaying the events of the previous night. She had gone through so many emotions, humiliation, embarrassment, and then confusion when the mysterious man had defended her. She still didn't understand what had happened. One moment, Vanessa was mocking her mercilessly in front of a room full of strangers. The next, the entire restaurant had gone silent, and Vanessa looked like she'd seen a ghost. The man, she didn't even know his name, had sat with her for nearly 20 minutes after that. He hadn't asked about her weight or her loneliness or anything Vanessa had said. He had simply asked her about her job, her interests, small, ordinary questions, as if the humiliation moments earlier had never happened. Then, just as quietly as he had arrived, he had stood, thanked her for the company, and left, without ever giving his name. She had asked the waiter, hesitantly, who the man was. The waiter had gone pale. "I really can't say, miss. I'm sorry." That answer had stayed with her all day. What kind of person makes a waiter go pale just by being mentioned? She told herself it didn't matter. He was a stranger. She would likely never see him again. Whatever had happened at that restaurant was a strange, one-time event, a small kindness in an otherwise humiliating night. Nothing more. She had no way of knowing that at that very moment, a folder with her name on it sat open on a desk across the city. She had no way of knowing that a man capable of destroying entire families with a single phone call had spent the last 24 hours learning everything about her life, and she certainly had no way of knowing that Vanessa Hale's father was about to have the worst week of his business career, and that it would all trace back to one moment of cruelty in a restaurant. 2 days later, Amelia's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She almost didn't answer it, but something made her pick up. "Amelia Reyes." A smooth, professional voice asked. "Yes? My name is Marcus. I'm calling on behalf of a private investment group. We came across your resume through a mutual contact, and we're impressed with your work. We'd like to invite you to an interview for a senior position with a significant salary increase." Amelia sat frozen, gripping the phone. I didn't apply anywhere." "Sometimes," Marcus said smoothly, "the right people find you instead." She didn't know it yet, but her ordinary, invisible life had just quietly ended, somewhere across the city. Damien Cross was setting his plan into motion, and Amelia Reyes was about to walk straight into it, without ever knowing that the mysterious stranger from the restaurant would soon be standing in front of her again. The building looked like something out of a magazine. Amelia stood outside it for a full 2 minutes before she found the courage to walk in. 50 floors of glass and steel, reflecting the morning sun so brightly she had to shield her eyes. A sign near the entrance read, "Cross Holdings Group," in simple silver letters. She had worn her best outfit, the only blazer she owned, ironed twice the night before. She had barely slept, her mind racing with questions. Why would a company like this want to interview her? She was just a junior accountant at a small firm nobody had heard of. The lobby alone was bigger than her entire apartment. Marble floors, a waterfall wall behind the reception desk. Well-dressed employees walking briskly, phones pressed to their ears, papers in hand. Miss Reyes? A receptionist asked, already standing before Amelia reached the desk. They're expecting you. Please follow me. They're expecting you. Not someone will be with you shortly. Not, please take a seat. Expecting her. As if she mattered, she was led to the 40th floor, into a large office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Her heart was pounding, and then she saw him, sitting behind the desk, sleeves rolled to his elbows, reading glasses pushed up into his dark hair. Was the man from the restaurant. Amelia stopped walking. For a moment she thought she was imagining it. But no, it was him. The same calm face, the same quiet, unreadable eyes. He looked up from his papers, and something in his expression shifted just slightly when he saw her standing frozen in the doorway. "Miss Reyes," he said, standing, "please have a seat." You, Amelia said, still standing near the door. "From the restaurant?" "Yes," he said simply. "Damien Cross, I own this company." Amelia's mind raced. The stranger who had defended her. The man the waiter had refused to name. He owned this building, this entire company. She sat down slowly, still trying to process it. "I don't understand," she said. "Why am I here?" "I didn't apply for anything." Damien sat back down, folding his hands on the desk. "I'll be honest with you, Miss Reyes, this isn't a typical interview." "Then what is it?" "An opportunity," he said. "I reviewed your work history. Your reviews are excellent. Your former employer undervalued you significantly. I'm offering you a position here. Senior accountant, double your current salary, full benefits." Amelia stared at him, searching his face for some sign that this was a joke, a trick, anything that made sense. "Why me? There are hundreds of qualified accountants in this city. Why would you personally interview me?" For a moment, Damien didn't answer. His eyes studied her carefully, the same way they had at the restaurant, like he was trying to understand something most people never bothered to look closely enough to see. "Because," he said finally, "I don't like watching good people get treated badly. And I don't forget it when I see it." Amelia's cheeks flushed. She looked down at her hands. "You didn't have to do that. At the restaurant. You didn't even know me." "No," Damien agreed. "I didn't. Then why did you?" He considered the question longer than she expected. "Because nobody else was going to." The room fell silent for a moment. Amelia didn't know what to say. In her whole life, people had ignored her, laughed at her, or looked past her. Nobody had ever simply decided, without hesitation, that she deserved to be defended. "I appreciate it," she said quietly. "Truly. But I can't accept a job I didn't earn." Something like respect flickered across Damien's face. Most people, offered this much money this easily, would have said yes immediately. She hadn't even hesitated to question it. "You misunderstand," he said. "This isn't charity, Miss Reyes. I looked at your work, your numbers, your accuracy, your reports. You are, quite simply, better at your job than most of the people currently working for me. I don't hire out of pity. It's bad for business." Amelia studied him, trying to decide if she believed him. Something about the steady, direct way he spoke made it hard to doubt him. "Take a few days," Damien said, standing, signaling the meeting was ending. "Think about it. The offer stands, whether you accept immediately or not." Amelia stood as well, still slightly dazed. As she reached the door, she paused and turned back. "Can I ask you something?" Damien looked up. "Go ahead." "That night, at the restaurant, what did you say to the manager to make him go so pale?" A faint, almost invisible smile crossed Damien's face, the first real expression she had seen from him. "That's a conversation for another day, Miss Reyes." She left the building, still trying to process everything that had happened. Her mind buzzed with questions she couldn't answer. Who exactly was Damien Cross? Why did an entire restaurant staff freeze in fear at the mention of his name? Why would a powerful businessman personally track down a stranger just to offer her a job? She told herself she would think about the offer, but deep down she already knew. She was going to accept it. That same evening, in a very different part of the city, a very different meeting was taking place. Robert Hale, Vanessa's father, sat across from two city council officials in a private room of one of his hotels. His hands were tightly clasped, his usual confident smile replaced by visible tension. "The waterfront permit has been stuck for 8 months, Robert said, frustration creeping into his voice. "I've paid everyone that needed paying. What's the hold-up now?" One of the officials shifted uncomfortably. "There's interest from another party. Someone with more influence than us has asked that the permit be delayed indefinitely." Robert's face went pale. "Who?" The officials exchanged a nervous glance, clearly unwilling to say the name out loud. "We can't say," one finally muttered. "But you'll want to be very careful about who your family associates with." Mr. Hale, very careful. Robert had no idea that the trouble tracing through his business empire had started with something as small as his daughter's cruel words in a restaurant. He had no idea that somewhere across the city, a man with more power than the entire city council combined had quietly decided his family needed to learn a lesson. And neither Robert nor Vanessa understood. Yet that the storm heading toward them had only just begun. Amelia accepted the job. It took her 3 days of pacing her small apartment, weighing every possible reason to say no, before she finally called the number Marcus had given her and said yes. Something about Damien Cross's words kept replaying in her mind. "I don't hire out of pity. It's bad for business." It was the first time in years someone had valued her work without pitying her. Her first 2 weeks at Cross Holdings Group passed in a blur of new faces, new systems, and an office nicer than anything she had ever worked in. She rarely saw Damien himself. He was, according to office rumors, a man who worked mostly behind closed doors, appearing suddenly and disappearing just as fast. So she was surprised when, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, Marcus appeared at her desk. "Mr. Cross would like to see you," he said. "It's not about work." Amelia's stomach tightened with nerves as she followed him to the elevator. Not about work meant she had no idea what to expect. She found Damien standing by the window in his office again, hands in his pockets, looking out over the city the way he seemed to do often, as if he was always watching something, calculating something even when he appeared still. "You wanted to see me?" Amelia asked. He turned. "I have a business dinner tonight. A client I need to make a good impression with. He values people who understand numbers as well as conversation. I'd like you to join." Amelia blinked. "Me? Why not one of your senior partners?" "Because," Damien said simply, "you're better with people than they are. And smarter than most of them, frankly." She almost laughed at the bluntness of it. "That's not really an answer." A faint smile touched his lips. "It's the only one you're getting." The dinner took place at a much quieter restaurant than the one where they'd first met, a small, elegant place tucked away on a side street, the kind of restaurant that didn't need a sign, because everyone who mattered already knew where it was. Damien's client, an older man named Mr. Whitfield, turned out to be warm and easy to talk to, and Amelia found herself relaxing more than she expected. She spoke about numbers, about risk, about long-term investment strategy, and watched Damien's eyes flicker toward her more than once, with something like quiet approval. At one point, while Whitfield stepped away to take a call, Amelia turned to Damien. "You could have handled that conversation yourself," she said. "You didn't need me here." "I told you," Damien said. "I wanted you here." That's still not an answer. He studied her for a long moment, the noise of the restaurant fading around them. "You ask a lot of questions, Miss Reyes. You give a lot of non-answers." "Mr. Cross." For the first time since she'd met him, Damien laughed, a low, quiet sound, like something rusty being used for the first time in years. It changed his entire face, softened the sharp control that always seemed to guard his expression. "Fair," he admitted. "Truthfully, I don't often enjoy these dinners." Tonight was different. Amelia felt her cheeks warm, unsure how to respond. Nobody had ever said something like that to her, so simply, so directly, without any of the mockery she'd grown used to. "Can I ask you something?" she said instead, changing the subject before her nerves got the better of her. "Everyone at the restaurant, the night we met, the manager, the waiter, they all acted like you were dangerous, like they were afraid of you. Why?" The warmth in Damien's expression cooled slightly, replaced by something more guarded. "I have a certain reputation in this city," he said carefully. "I deal with powerful, difficult people. Sometimes that requires a firm hand." "That's vague. It's meant to be." Amelia studied him, sensing there was far more beneath the surface than he was willing to share. But something told her not to push further, not yet. Whatever Damien Cross was hiding, she suspected it was bigger than she could imagine. Weeks passed. Amelia and Damien's paths crossed more and more. Dinners that started as business, meetings that ran longer than necessary, quiet conversations in his office after everyone else had gone home. Neither of them spoke of what was growing between them, but both felt it. Amelia began to notice things, too. Strange things, Marcus and other men around the office who moved with the discipline of soldiers, not businessmen. Meetings that happened behind locked doors, with men who never appeared on any official company documents. Phone calls Damien would step out to take, his voice dropping into a tone she had never heard him use with her. Cold, sharp, final. Once, she walked past his office and heard him say, quietly but firmly, "Make sure it's handled quietly. I don't want this traced back to us." She had stopped in the hallway, frozen, before quickly walking away, telling herself it was nothing. Business people talked like that sometimes. It didn't mean anything, but deep down, a small, uneasy feeling had begun to grow. Meanwhile, Robert Hale's business empire was falling apart piece by piece. The waterfront permit had been denied outright. 2 of his hotel partners had quietly pulled their investments without explanation. His usual lenders had suddenly stopped returning his calls. Whispers had started moving through the city's business circles. Whispers that Robert Hale's name was no longer safe to be associated with. Vanessa, oblivious to the real reason behind her father's sudden misfortune, had noticed the change in mood at home, the tension, the late-night arguments, her father's growing desperation. She had no idea that her cruel words to a stranger in a restaurant had set all of it into motion. She had no idea that the storm was about to reach her. Robert Hale's world was collapsing, and he finally decided he needed answers. He sat in his study late one night, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him, going through every deal that had fallen apart in the last 2 months. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidence. Every investor who pulled out, every permit that got denied, every lender who stopped answering, it all traced back to roughly the same time. The same week as that dinner at the restaurant, he picked up his phone and called an old contact. A man who had worked in city politics for decades and knew things most people didn't. "I need to know who's been blocking me," Robert said, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. "Someone's been working against me for weeks. Permits, investors, lenders, all of it." There was a long pause on the other end. "Robert, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Have you crossed anyone recently? Anyone dangerous?" "What kind of question is that?" "Just answer it," Robert thought back, frustrated, trying to remember any business rival he might have upset. Then slowly a memory surfaced. Vanessa mentioning something weeks ago about an odd incident at a restaurant. A stranger. The manager going pale. There was something, Robert said slowly. "My daughter had some kind of run-in with a man at a restaurant. I didn't think much of it." Another long silence. When his contact spoke again, his voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. "Robert, listen to me carefully. If that man was who I think he was, you need to fix this. Immediately apologize, do whatever it takes. You do not want this man as an enemy. Who is he?" Damien Cross. Robert's blood ran cold. He had heard the name before, always spoken carefully, always followed by uncomfortable silence. A man rumored to control half the city's underground business, untouchable by law, feared even by people who feared nothing. He hung up the phone, hands shaking, and called for Vanessa. Vanessa arrived in her father's study, confused by the urgency in his voice. She had never seen her father look so afraid. "Tell me exactly what happened," Robert said. "At that restaurant, everything. Don't leave anything out." Vanessa hesitated, suddenly nervous. "It wasn't a big deal. There was this girl sitting alone, and I just made a few comments. Then a man stepped in and told me to stop. What did he look like? Dark hair, suit, calm but intense, I guess. Why does this matter? Robert closed his eyes. Do you have any idea what you've done? Dad, you're scaring me. That man, Robert said, is Damien Cross. Do you understand what that means? Everything that's happened to this family in the last 2 months, the permits, the investors, the lenders, that's him. He's been dismantling everything I've built, piece by piece, because of what you said to that girl. Vanessa's face went white. That's insane. It was just words. I didn't even hit her. With a man like that, Robert said, words are enough. The next morning, Vanessa did something she never thought she would do. She went to Cross Holdings Group, determined to speak with Damien Cross directly, to apologize, to beg if she had to. Anything to save her family. She was stopped at the lobby by security, but after insisting for nearly 20 minutes, she was finally allowed up, though not to see Damien. Instead, she was led into a small meeting room where Marcus was waiting. Mr. Cross doesn't take unscheduled meetings, Marcus said flatly. Please, Vanessa said, her confidence from weeks ago completely gone. I need to apologize. My family, we've lost everything. Permits, partners, money. Please just let me explain. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Mr. Cross isn't interested in apologies, Miss Hale. He's interested in actions. What you did to that woman wasn't a private matter. You humiliated her in front of an entire restaurant, publicly, cruelly, without a second thought. I know that was wrong. Do you? Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp. Or are you only sorry now that there are consequences? Vanessa had no answer for that, because deep down she knew it was true. I'll pass along that you came, Marcus said, standing to signal the meeting was over. But I wouldn't expect much. Mr. Cross doesn't forget cruelty easily, and he especially doesn't forget cruelty towards someone who never did anything to deserve it. Vanessa left the building in tears. Her father's business, and possibly her entire family's future, hanging by a thread because of one careless night. What she didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that Amelia herself had no idea any of this was happening. She had no idea that Damien had spent weeks quietly destroying the Hale family's business empire. She had no idea that the quiet, careful businessman she was falling for was capable of ending someone's entire livelihood without raising his voice. That truth was coming for her faster than she realized, because that same afternoon, while reviewing quarterly reports in the finance department, Amelia overheard 2 employees talking quietly near the break room. Heard the Hale family is finished. Permits denied, investors gone, banks won't touch them. All because Cross decided to make an example of them. Why would he care about some rich family's hotel business? Apparently it's about his new girl. Vanessa Hale humiliated her at a restaurant a while back. Cross doesn't let things like that go. Amelia stood frozen outside the break room, the papers in her hands suddenly feeling impossibly heavy. His new girl. Cross doesn't let things like that go. Everything suddenly made sense. The strange phone calls, the guarded conversations, the fear in every employee's eyes whenever his name was mentioned. And now, the horrifying realization that the man she had begun falling for had quietly destroyed an entire family's future. For her. Amelia didn't remember walking back to her desk. She sat there for nearly an hour, staring at her computer screen without seeing it, the overheard conversation replaying over and over in her mind. Cross doesn't let things like that go. She thought about the phone call she'd overheard weeks ago. Make sure it's handled. Quietly, I don't want this traced back to us, and felt sick. She had told herself it was nothing, just business talk. Now she understood exactly what it meant. An entire family's business gone. Not through fair competition, not through bad luck, but because Damien had decided quietly and without asking her that Vanessa Hale needed to be punished, and he had used his power to make it happen. She left work early that day, telling Marcus she wasn't feeling well. It wasn't entirely a lie. Damien noticed her absence immediately. It wasn't like Amelia to leave early. And when he called her office and got no answer, a small, unfamiliar feeling of concern settled in his chest, something he wasn't used to feeling for anyone. He went to her apartment that evening, something he had never done before. He stood outside her door for a long moment before knocking, unsure why he suddenly felt nervous, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Amelia opened the door and froze when she saw him. "Can I come in?" Damien asked. "You left work without a word." "I wanted to make sure you were all right." "I know what you did," Amelia said quietly, not moving from the doorway. "To the Hale family. I heard people talking at the office." Damien's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, a kind of stillness, like a man bracing for impact. "May I explain?" he asked. "Please." He stepped inside, and Amelia closed the door behind him, arms crossed, waiting. "After that night at the restaurant," Damien began, "I looked into Vanessa's family. Her father had been trying to bribe city officials for a permit, officials who already worked with me. It gave me a way to apply pressure, and I used it. Because of me," Amelia said. "Because of what Vanessa said to me. Yes, you destroyed a family's business, Damien. Their livelihood. Because a spoiled girl said something cruel to me at dinner. She humiliated you," Damien said, his voice hardening slightly. "In front of a room full of strangers, without a second thought, simply because she believed she could. People like that continue behaving that way because no one ever stops them. So you decided to be the one who stops them by ruining an entire family?" "I decided," Damien said carefully, "that cruelty should have consequences. That's the world I live in, Amelia. It's not gentle and it's not fair, but it's honest in its own way." Amelia shook her head, sitting down slowly on the edge of her couch, trying to process everything. "This is what Marcus meant, isn't it? At the restaurant that first night, whatever he whispered to the manager, this is who you really are. Not just a businessman." Damien was quiet for a long moment, weighing his next words carefully. "I told you once that I have a certain reputation in this city. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. Then tell me the whole truth, now." He sat down across from her, his usual composure giving way to something more careful, more honest than she had ever seen from him. "I control a significant portion of this city's underground business, not through legitimate means alone. People fear me because they should, because I've built an empire on being someone who cannot be crossed. It's not a reputation, Amelia. It's who I am." The room went silent. Amelia stared at him, her mind racing, trying to reconcile the man in front of her, the man who had defended her, who had laughed with her, who had looked at her like she mattered, with the man who had just admitted, calmly, to running a criminal empire. "Why are you telling me this now?" she finally asked. "You could have kept lying." "Because you deserve the truth," Damien said. "And because I don't want to be someone you have to guess about. Whatever happens next, I'd rather you know exactly who I am." Amelia felt tears building, a mixture of fear, confusion, and something else she couldn't quite name. "I don't know what to do with this, Damien. I don't know if I can be near someone who destroys people's lives so easily." "I don't destroy innocent lives," Damien said quietly. "I destroy people who hurt others and believe they'll never face consequences. There's a difference, even if it doesn't always look like it, is there?" He didn't answer immediately, because even he wasn't entirely certain anymore. Amelia asked him to leave that night, and he did without argument, without pressure, respecting the space she clearly needed. For 3 days, she didn't go to work. She sat in her apartment, turning everything over in her mind, every kind moment, every rescued dinner, every quiet act of care from a man who, she now knew, was capable of ending someone's entire world without hesitation. She thought about Vanessa's cruelty. She thought about years of being ignored, mocked, made to feel invisible by people who never faced any consequences for how they treated her. And she thought about the first time in her life someone had refused to let that happen. She didn't know if that made Damien dangerous or simply different from everyone else who had ever crossed her path. On the 4th day, her phone rang. It was Marcus. "Miss Reyes," he said, his voice unusually careful. "There's something happening that I think you need to see. It involves Vanessa Hale, and it's happening tonight." Marcus wouldn't explain further over the phone. He only told Amelia to be ready by 7, that a car would come for her, and that what she was about to see would help her make her decision. She almost said no. Part of her wanted to stay away from all of it, from Damien, from the danger, from the truth she still hadn't fully accepted. But another part of her, a part that had spent her whole life watching cruel people get away with everything, needed to see what was about to happen. At 7, a black car waited outside her building. It took her to a large hotel downtown, the very hotel Robert Hale had been fighting to save. Tonight, it turned out, was the night of a charity gala, one of the last public events the Hale family could still afford to host. A desperate attempt to save their reputation in front of the city's wealthiest people. Marcus met her at the entrance. "Mr. Cross didn't ask me to bring you here," he said quietly. "I made that decision myself. I think you deserve to see the whole truth, not just pieces of it." Inside, the ballroom sparkled with chandeliers and formal gowns, the same kind of glittering world Amelia had felt so out of place in months ago. She spotted Vanessa near the front, pale and tense, clearly aware that her family's future depended on tonight going well. Then she saw Damien. He stood near the back of the room, calm as always, watching everything unfold with the same quiet intensity she remembered from their very first meeting. When his eyes found hers across the room, something in his expression softened, surprise and something like hope. He crossed the room to her. "You came. Marcus brought me," Amelia said. "I still don't fully understand why. Neither did I. Until now," Damien admitted, before she could respond. Robert Hale stepped up to a small stage at the front of the room, tapping a microphone, forcing a smile onto his tired face. "Thank you all for coming tonight. It means a great deal to my family during this difficult time." Amelia watched Vanessa standing near her father, eyes darting nervously around the room, clearly searching for Damien. When she spotted him standing beside Amelia, her face went pale. Robert continued his speech, stumbling slightly through carefully rehearsed words about resilience and community. It was clear to everyone in the room that the family was drowning, putting on a brave face for people who already knew the truth. When the speech ended, Damien did something Amelia didn't expect. He walked toward the stage. Robert froze as Damien approached, the color draining from his face. The entire room seemed to sense that something significant was happening, conversations quieting as heads turned. "Mr. Hale," Damien said, his voice calm but carrying easily through the silent room. "A word, if you don't mind." Robert nodded stiffly, clearly too afraid to refuse. "I think," Damien continued, loud enough for the room to hear, "everyone here deserves to understand exactly why your business has struggled these past 2 months." Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. Robert's eyes widened in panic. "Please," Robert whispered. "Not here." "Your daughter," Damien said, ignoring him, "humiliated a woman in public, mocked her mercilessly in front of an entire restaurant for no reason other than her own cruelty. That woman had done nothing wrong. She was simply trying to enjoy her birthday alone." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Vanessa stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "I made a decision that night," Damien continued, "that cruelty like that should have consequences. So I made sure it did." The room was completely silent now, every guest hanging on his words. "But," Damien said, his tone shifting slightly, "I've since realized something. Punishing a family destroys more than just the person who deserves it. It affects people who had nothing to do with the cruelty at all." He paused, glancing briefly at Amelia, who stood watching from across the room, stunned. "So tonight," Damien said, turning back to Robert, "I'm lifting every obstacle I've placed in front of your business. Your permit will be approved. Your investors will return. This ends here. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because someone I respect deeply taught me that cruelty answered with more cruelty solves nothing." The room erupted into quiet, stunned whispers. Robert nearly collapsed with relief, murmuring shaky thanks. Vanessa stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, not just from relief, but from the humiliation of having her cruelty exposed in front of everyone who mattered in the city. Damien turned to Vanessa directly. His voice, quieter now, meant only for her. You have a second chance tonight that you didn't earn. Use it to become someone better than the person who mocked a stranger for sport. That's the only apology I'll accept. Vanessa nodded, unable to speak. Shame written across her face for the first time in her life. Damien walked back across the room to Amelia, who watched him with an expression somewhere between disbelief and something warmer. Something she hadn't fully allowed herself to feel until this exact moment. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Yes, Damien said. I did. You showed me something these last few months, Amelia. I've spent my entire life believing that power and fear were the only things that kept the world in order. You made me question that. I'm still not sure who you really are, Amelia admitted. The dangerous man everyone fears, or the man who stood up for a stranger at a restaurant. Maybe both, Damien said honestly. Maybe that's simply who I am. But I know exactly who I want to become, and I'd like you to be part of that. If you're willing, Amelia looked at him for a long moment, weighing everything, the fear, the danger, the undeniable truth of who Damien Cross really was. But she also thought about every quiet kindness, every moment he had chosen to stand beside her without hesitation, and the rare, real change she had just witnessed in front of an entire room of strangers. I'm willing, she said finally. To find out. Damien's face broke into a small, genuine smile, the same rare smile she had seen only once before. At a quiet dinner weeks ago, outside, the city lights sparkled beneath a clear night sky, indifferent to the empire being reshaped inside those walls. Amelia Reyes, once invisible, once mocked, once alone, now stood beside the most powerful man in the city, not as someone he had rescued, but as someone who had, without even realizing it, changed him for the better.